Well, good morning to everyone here in the US and good afternoon to those joining in Europe or elsewhere around the world. My name is Landon Darrence. I am the Senior Director of the Global Energy Center at the Atlantic Council. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to day 3 of the Atlantic Council's Central Europe Week, our annual series celebrating US Central European relations and highlighting how the United States and Central Europe can together shape transatlantic responses to global challenges. I think it's safe to say that we're in the heart of a challenge in terms of an energy crisis. And today's conversation on the energy transition and diversification for a more secure and prosperous Europe is going to tackle some future issues, in terms of the region's energy transition efforts and how to strengthen Central European energy security in the wake of key challenges such as Moscow's curtailment of gas flows, the security of energy infrastructure, the implementation of the G7 price cap and EU seaborne crude and oil embargo. There's a lot going on. So we're very excited to have some featured distinguished panelists from Central Europe and the broader region to share their perspectives on the energy transition in Europe, what's going on. I'm delighted to introduce our speakers today, beginning with His Excellency Yaroslav Demchinkov, who is the Deputy Minister of Energy of Ukraine, Minister Anna Virchal, who is the Senior Special Envoy for Strategic and International Affairs at Nuclear Electrica, and Václav Bertuska, Ambassador at Large for Energy Security of the Czech Republic. Great to have each of you. Thank you so much for joining us for today's timely discussion. And I just wanted to open it up. I think, this is a conversation about Central European energy, Central European Week. So the broader audience might not have the foundation in terms of what is going on in terms of the energy crisis. And so I just want to lay a foundation, beginning with Ambassador Bartuska. If you would just provide some context on where you see things on the ground right now in Europe, and I'll similarly turn to the rest of the panelists as well.
Okay, well, good morning to all of you in the US or Canada, and good afternoon back to Europeans. I think that what we see today in December 2022 is much more optimistic picture than we had in February of this year when Russia invaded Ukraine. Because back then, Europe was fully dependent on Russian natural gas. 40% of our consumption last year, 155 billion cubic meters, were from Russia. And it seemed very difficult to somehow bypass that or get around it. Now, 10 months later, it's a very different picture. The share of Russian natural gas in Europe is below 7%. And most of Europe is simply running without Russian gas. We had no Russian gas since summer, and we're happy on the Norwegian LNG and Dutch natural gas, just like Germany or France or others. There were significant developments, plenty of new LNG terminals. Czech Republic actually acquired a stake in the Dutch LNG terminal already in June. There are plenty of them being built in Germany and elsewhere. So I would say overall, what Europe is showing is a great ability to actually respond to threat. We did not have this unity for a long time. I would like to thank specifically Vladimir Putin for bringing unity back to European Union. We actually tended to disagree on many things. Thanks to his brutal war, barbaric war in Ukraine, Europe is united like it hasn't been for a very long time. So thanks to Moscow as well.
Well, I appreciate that insight. And I just want to keep building on the context in Central Europe before I turn to the Deputy Minister. Anna, Romania has been a leader in terms of thinking through diversification in the context of European energy security for some time. I would love your perspective from on the ground as well, just in terms of contextualizing where we are today in terms of the energy crisis and some initial thoughts on that.
Thank you so much. Firstly, congratulations again for dedicating time and energy in a very positive way to our region, a region that is under serious challenges as we see. Very grateful to and honored to be always in discussions organized by Atlantic Council. So here's thank you. Good morning and good afternoon to everybody taking time to be part of this discussion. As you said, Romania, and I'm very proud to say that Romania has been very wise when it comes to energy mix. From very beginning in 1960s, we were quite courageous to choose, for example, in the nuclear field, we went with the North American technology for the 2 power plants that we have. which is at Chernavod, and we developed them with CANDU technology. And you can imagine how much pressure was at that time to go with the Russian technology, and we said no. And that's why I'm very proud to say that Romania is the first country to have the first deployment of the SMR in Europe. And again, a very courageous and very wise decision, I should say. But we have that balanced energy mix, and we try to reduce the Russian mixed, the gas into our energy mix at quite a minimum level. So at the present moment, we have no, we secure to have other sources of supply, from the one that was like 10, 15% from the Russian gas. And we've been doing that in a very wise way. But likewise, as I said, in the nuclear, for example, we have no dependency on the Russian. But what I want to say is a part of not just praising Romania and Poland and Czech Republic. So practically the countries in our region, which we've been saying along all the time for many years now, take away the energy from Putin's hands. You see that, unfortunately, Europe is facing an extreme energy crisis triggered by the war in Ukraine. The pressure of high prices on consumers and industry can no longer be addressed throughout short-term measures, such as compensation and market intervention. That's why it's important to have that strategic planning. And a long-term strategy is needed for the economic relaunch of European and, quite frankly, for the world economy, on a base of an imperative of the resilience, independent and diversified energy mix. And from that point of view, I am saluting that at the EU level now, it is finally agreed to leave that energy mix at the state level, each state, because according to the realities on the ground. Look, it is sad to say, but Russia had deployed energy projects in Europe, Nord Stream 1, Nord Stream 2, in such a manner that lately they gained a leverage over the countries using them. And it was Romania, it was Poland, it were other voices from Central Eastern Europe who said since 2019 about Nord Stream 2, saying, look, that's going to be used as a weapon. And unfortunately, we were right. We wanted to be proven wrong, but unfortunately, the realities on the ground now in Ukraine is showing that we were right. And what I'm trying to say is, let's be wise and learn from the past mistakes in order to build the present and especially the future. And treating energy as a matter of security, energy is a human right. So we need to do everything as possible to secure that right to everybody at an affordable prices. But likewise, when it comes to long-term strategy, is use the energy for what it is, a security issue. And that's why I am saluting the involvement of the US in our region, not just through the new SMRs, for example, new technologies, but US understood that energy, it's a security matter as well, and is helping countries such as Romania, other countries from Central Eastern Europe to dealing with this challenge. And I think, what we are witnessing today, when Kremlin has created a geopolitical weapon ready at any time to be used. And we need to be very, very careful with that and not allow those mistakes to take place any longer in our part of the world, and for that matter, in any part of the world. Talking about Nord Stream 2, as I said, Romania opposed Nord Stream 2 at that time. We were quite courageous and determined to stand against that. And we were right. That's why when it comes, as I said, and I'm wrapping up, when it comes to the energy, I think a wise thing is to look at the realities on the ground and have that energy mix, that balanced, where nuclear, for example, should play an important role with the new technologies on the SMRs. And I will come back, with your permission, to tell you what we are doing on that front. But more importantly, to have that energy mix that is securing you a very affordable energy, but in a sustainable way.
So I really appreciate the context there, Minister Birchall. I think turning to the Deputy Minister Demchenkov, obviously our distinguished panelists here have laid a foundation for how Europe is experiencing an energy crisis. Ukraine's on the front lines of an actual physical impacts of the energy crisis. And I'd love to hear from you, your perspectives, both in the context of what is happening in Ukraine, how it's impacting your energy infrastructure, but also in the context of Central Europe Week, how that impacts the broader conversation around energy security in Europe as well.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a great honor to join today. Atlantic Council is doing a great job. Really appreciate being involved in this job. Thank you so much. Indeed, the situation in Ukraine right now is quite critical. Our energy sector remains major frontline in this war. The Putin's regime weaponizing energy and winter, and it looks like Putin is not pleased with his military generals because they do not deliver any big wins. So he is now waiting for General Winter to freeze out Ukrainians and break our will to fight. There is a tangible threat of a nationwide humanitarian catastrophe. Unfortunately, 2 weeks ago and 2 days ago and tomorrow evening, yesterday evening, Russia continues its well-known strategy of forcing Ukraine to negotiate through outright terror. They organize massive missile attack on energy infrastructure. Following the massive attacks, our transmission and distribution system suffered critical damage. Our generating facilities went offline, especially of nuclear stations that are central in our energy mix. They are targeting our grids to break down Ukraine's integrated power system, which operates based on the principle of mutual exchange of energy between the regions. And they are targeting our power plants to prevent us from generating enough power for the whole country. But after last week's and recent attack, we have about 10 million citizens without electricity. It's more than a quarter of current population of Kyiv living in Ukraine, in Kyiv, particularly in the capital, the biggest city, and in Ukraine. And but this is really a huge threat for Ukraine, but also for whole European continent. But we should understand that Russia invasion of Ukraine has affected already tight energy markets and pushed all of us into a global energy crisis of quite huge, significant scale. And countries all over the world felt it, in particular the vulnerable countries. And even before this invasion, as Russia was using energy as a weapon and leverage to achieve its geopolitical goals, energy markets got dangerously vulnerable and were on the point of disbalance. Security of supply in our region and even globally has more become a key concern. Also, I would like to say that we have a problem with poverty energy, preventing energy poverty in the region. And this topic also becoming to the forefront. Now in the markets, we have quite a stable situation. Markets are rebalancing. Russian gas, oil, and oil are being replaced by LNG and energy resources that come from other countries, which are more reliable partner than Russia for the EU, for the Central Europe. And this overall trend for Russia replacing Russian fossil fuels should continue at a good pace. Moreover, this trend should spread to include Russian nuclear fuels, and we should make a coordinated effort to ban Russian nuclear technologies. Because you know that Russia is a nuclear country. They have nuclear weapon, they have nuclear generation, but this country occupied the biggest in Europe nuclear power plant, 6 gigawatt nuclear power plant in Ukraine. Seizure this NPP and use this object, these premises of nuclear power plant for military activities for Russian troops. This is act of nuclear terrorism, and we should prevent further actions. And this should be done also to prevent Russia from the showing an example to other hostile regimes, for other terrorists, that energy can be used for blackmail or as a tool of war. This is impossible to use civil infrastructure for war needs, for as a weapon. And the very important topic for today, speeding up energy transition, phasing out fossil fuels and development of sustainable energy is what we call for today in order to have a better, greener future for our children, as well as for to stop Putin, who is a real hydrocarbon dictator, as previous speakers mentioned. A lot of funds came from selling fossil fuels for Europe also to Putin's regime budget. So speeding up energy transition and phasing out fossil fuels and developing on sustainable energy, this is what we need right now. And of course, victory of Ukraine to celebrate together, but together with all of our activities in Ukraine, we should stop Putin and stop use fossil fuels and speed up energy transition.
If I may jump in following what the Deputy Minister was saying, because as we see the recent intensification of Russia's attack on critical energy infrastructure in Ukraine is another demonstration of Putin's use of energy, obviously as a weapon of war. And we all witness the effect, the devastating effect, not just on the local economy and well-being of Ukraine, but on other neighboring countries. And I would like to talk here about Republic of Moldova. Because the attacks have also crippled this security of supply, the supply chain in the Republic of Moldova. And I'm very proud to say that Romania is currently ensuring up to 95% of the internal energy consumption of Moldova, and nuclear electrica is a big part of that energy supply. But I would like to stress and use this opportunity to stress the importance of an immediate and unified support from the EU member states for Ukraine and for Republic of Moldova, because their ability to withstand the current winter is a key concern for us, and we should prove the values of democracy and solidarity in aiding them throughout this critical time. And it was very good that Ukraine and Republic of Moldova, they were integrating in the EU energy grid, which is bringing obviously regional benefits. And from our side, I should share with you that Romania already engaged in a trilateral format with Chișinău and Kiev to better coordinate on energy security issues in the region. But I just wanted to stress how devastating effects are having on Moldova as well, and how much needed this solidarity for both Ukraine but Moldova as well, to help them to pass through this very, very difficult time, because you can see it. I mean, he is attacking the critical infrastructure on energy, because he wants Ukraine, our friends from Ukraine, to freeze during this winter. And we need to really stop that and find ways of helping them in a very pragmatic way, both Ukraine but Republic of Moldova as well.
Ambassador Bertushka, Minister Birchall just reinforced the urgency, I think, of why we need to act now. The Deputy Minister talked about the trends to replace Russian energy supply. We hear a lot here in Washington, D.C., that, and I think you reinforced this in your opening remarks, that Europe may be looking good this winter, but this is a sustained effort. And as we turn to next winter, I love your reflections in terms of what's the disposition of the energy sector look like? What supply changes and trends are you envisioning in the near term to make sure that countries in Central Europe, countries such as Moldova and Ukraine are increasingly finding their way to a more sustainable future?
Well, thank you. As I said in the opening, it seems that we will get through this winter relatively fine, unless there is a really, really cold winter. We can never prevent that, but let's not open the champagne yet. Let's open it in April after the winter is over. But I think that once we get through this winter without Russian gas, it will greatly enhance our self-belief and the trust in ourselves. And surely there will be a couple more difficult winters. I usually speak about 3 difficult winters for Europe, because replacing so much Russian gas in a very short time is difficult. But we will manage, and we will also manage to help Ukraine. We are helping Ukraine and Moldova as well. So, I really think this question of, to some extent, of believing in ourselves. I do remember when in February we said, after the war started, that we have to get rid of Russian gas. Many gas people in Europe, in Germany and elsewhere, were saying, we cannot survive without Russia. It's impossible. Well, it is possible to live without Russian gas. It will be difficult. It's not cheap. That's definitely not the case. We will need plenty of coal to get through the next couple of winters. We will burn, as I used to say, we will burn anything to get through the winters, but we will manage. And once we get through the winter, will be much more interesting to talk to Russians somewhere on the side, like showing them that we need them much less than they thought, but they need us much more than they think. And I think the embargo which came into effect, the oil embargo which came into effect 2 days ago on Monday, December the 5th, is a fine example of Europe doing something very, very unpleasant to Russia. It's difficult for us as well. I mean, no doubt about it. I mean, the whole price ceiling of the G7 countries and the embargo on the Russian tankers to the EU is difficult for us as well. It is costly to us as well, but it costs Russia much more. And we will continue that. I mean, in February comes the ban on the import of Russian products, oil products, gasoline and diesel into the EU. That will be difficult for us as well to replace with different sources of diesel and gasoline, but we will do that. And I think step by step, we're showing Russia that we can live without Russia. It's much more difficult for Russia to live without the world. And one area in which the West has slept behind the wheel, and it's something that we should acknowledge, is the nuclear area, especially nuclear fuel. 40% of global capacity in enrichment and conversion, which are 2 very important steps for nuclear fuel, 40% globally are in the hands of Rosatom, the Russian state company. And there will be plenty of effort needed from the West, US, Canada, Europe, other players, Australia, and so forth, to get our act together and to replace this necessary supply of enrichment and nuclear fuel, because that's something we really need in the West. Just for the American audience, it might be surprising to you that actually there are at the moment no US capacities, domestic, US-owned enrichment capacities. 80% of your market, 80% owns a European company called Urenco, and 20% is controlled by Russians. So it's not just Europeans actually who, to some extent, forgot about security as a very important aspect when it comes to energy.
So, Minister Birchall, the Deputy Minister now and also Ambassador Bertushka have brought up the context of nuclear energy, and I do want to dive into this. And in the same token, I want to also recognize some of the questions we have coming in, and thank you for those questions from the audience. Paraphrasing Ariane's conversation here in the first question, there's also a context here about supply chains and supply chain diversification. I think supply chains are clearly complicated, and Ambassador Bertushka is highlighting some of those aspects in terms of the U.S. supply of nuclear fuel as well. How is Romania pursuing the diversification of those supply chains and breaking away from the culpability of facilitating further Russian energy trade? Not just in the context of oil and gas, but the broader energy slate of technologies that we have at our disposal.
Well, if I just give me a second to just bring you up to date. As I said earlier, I'm very proud that Romania was among the very few countries, I think is the only one in Central Eastern Europe since 1960s, who said no to on the nuclear field to the Russian technology. And we went with the North American technology, which is the CANDU. And since then, we built the 2 reactors, and now we are in the process of building 2 more reactors and refurbishing a unit as well. And we have currently, without building the new reactors, the new 2 reactors, we have around 20-something% of the energy in Romania produced by the nuclear. So that's a really good, and in Romania, because Nuclearelectrica, and I'm not talking with subjectivity here, it's just the realities on the ground. We have more than 25 years in terms of the operating. Safely is above everything. We operated and we are on top of any charter you can, is been done all around the world. Nuclearelectrica and Romania are among very top in terms of the safety. But then, looking at the opportunities, and again, and again, allow me to praise the involvement of the US in Central Eastern Europe. And I would strongly advise to look very carefully, because as Deputy Minister from Ukraine was saying, this is, and I was hinting it, this is a market with the Russian technology in the nuclear, which is a market for the SMR's technologies, US technologies, to come and grab it. It makes sense commercially speaking, because it's 240 billion euros. So commercially is making sense, but don't lose sight of the security aspect as well, having energy dealt in terms of the security. Now, coming back to Romania, as I said, we took another very important decision when we kicked the Russians and the Chinese out of any involvement in the nuclear in Romania. So we are now in the partnership, in an exclusivity partnership with NewScale. We are the first one to deploy the first SMR in Europe, and we are making very, very good steps. I mean, we have a roadmap, we already have the plant, just technically speaking. We have the site already, we signed the SPV, we got the letters of commitment, from the letters of intent from the US EXIM, and so on and so forth. So practically, we are securing with the SMRs, complementing with the other 2 reactors that we are planning to build, to actually come to close 40-45% of our energy production in from the nuclear. And I have to say that I am happy to see that nuclear is not the bow in the room anymore. Even now, as I am in Brussels at the US TDA mission, again, all the feedback is coming. Look at the nuclear for what it is. It's one of the cleanest sources of energy, affordable and reliable, because we need to look at the source of energy in terms of the consistency and being reliable as well, and building the supply chain. And I have to say that Romania stands a very good chance to be the hub of a supply chain for the new SMR's technologies. And that's the future. I mean, there are so many benefits from the nuclear energy. Look at the hydrogen, it was mentioned earlier. Look at the benefits for the medical industry, the health industry. But it needs a better communication, and that's why I commend you and I thank you for using those opportunities. And Atlantic Council put a very good event in Turkey, just a few months ago, when again is trying to get the message out. Hey guys, let's look at the nuclear as being a very good source of a reliable and affordable source of energy. In terms of what we can do through Nuclear Electrica, with having this amazing track record, I think we could be a very, very good operator and good partner operating safely in the region. And, personally, I would like to see this market in our part of the world grabbed by the US technologies, by the SMRs, because, it's easy to get it. And it's safer for us in terms of putting that peace of mind, if I may say, that, you guys are there and helping us with the energy. And I will close by saying that Romania does stand a very good chance in not just being the hub for the supply chain, but being a very good operator. But Romania could become an energy provider, an energy security provider in our region, which again, it's a very, very important aspect. But on the nuclear, I think an effort needs to be, it needs a continuing effort to just say, look, nuclear is not the bow. And look at the recent taxonomy. That's a huge plus for the industry with the inclusion in the taxonomy of the nuclear and the gas. That means that the financial institutions can now financing the nuclear plants, because we all know that the nuclear plants, yes, they are a little bit more expensive at the beginning, but if you look on a medium to long-term basis, is paying off that investment. So now I guess if I'm not giving you homework, but hey, you invited me, so I can. Maybe one of the focus that we should have in the future is to try to engage more with the financial institutions and ask them kindly to look at the nuclear projects to try to help financing those projects, at least at the very, very beginning. And that's why, again, I'm going back to the US and the US government helping, deploying, including with the financial help, deploying those technologies, the SMR technology in our region.
Thank you so much, Anna. Ambassador Bertuska, I see you have your hand up, so I'd love you to jump in. And then we do have a question out of Korea, and I want to bring it to the Deputy Minister to have some conversation around that as well. But over to you, Mr. Ambassador.
Just very briefly to what Anna said. Look, there will be no private investment in nuclear for quite a long time. Everything nuclear in the world is being funded by the state, or at least secured by the state. There is nowhere in the world a private investment in nuclear. So that's the reality. I think we might see private investment or financial investment a couple of decades from now if nuclear proves to be viable. But at the moment, it's a state area everywhere in the world, even in the US and in Canada. So that's the reality. We have the project nuclear in my country, fully paid by the state. The same in Poland, the same in Romania, Britain, Finland, and elsewhere. That's the reality at the moment. That's all. Thank you.
If I just jump in, I see a question in the chat, and I really want to address this because it says if there are Russian investments in strategic domains in Romania, I can tell you a clear no. And I've been personally involved when I was Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Justice to really make sure that those investments of the Russians, that's why I was hinting it, Romania was among the very few countries at the very beginning in 2019, when we opposed the Nord Stream 2, then we've done a memorandum for the 5G, and then we kicked the Chinese out of the nuclear power plant. So in very short, I can tell you that by law now, there is, in Romania, by law, the Russian and the Chinese investments in the strategic areas, including energy, are forbidden by law. So I apologize, but I just wanted to say
it's wonderful. You're preempting where I want to go, which is to take this to some questions from the audience. And so very glad that we're tackling these. I'm gonna turn to a question that's specifically coming out of Korea, and I'm gonna read it. But Deputy Minister Demchenkov, I want to provide some context on it as well. So the question is, does Europe plan to drastically reduce its dependence on Russia for energy imports in the future, even after the Russian-Ukraine war? is it possible? And I really want to think about this in the context. There's a lot of conversation also around, the potential for Ukraine, perhaps the silver lining of what is a very challenging period for your country, to play a pivotal role in actually helping do just that and divide, really diversify Europe's broader energy sources. And you discussed it, I think, in the context of a sustainable energy future as well. Maybe you can build on that.
Thank you. Before I provide answer on your question, I would like to give some more information, because I may be repeating what you already know, but I want to bring home the extent of the trouble we find ourselves in. More than 50% of electricity in Ukraine is generated by our nuclear power plants. And this discussion is really important for us for common understanding the issue of nuclear security in our region. In Europe, Ukraine is second only to France in nuclear generation. As I have mentioned, the biggest in Europe nuclear power plant in Zaporizhia, 6 gigawatt plant, was occupied, has been occupied and used as a military base by the Russian troops at the center of Europe. This NPP does not deliver power into the Ukrainian grid, and after repeated provocations, the station also suffered multiple disconnections when it had to switch to diesel generators. And following the massive attack 2 weeks ago, the other 3 nuclear power plants were disconnected temporarily by automatic defense system, and for some period they were powered by diesel generators. Imagine war, shelling, and diesel generators. Any mistake can provoke the catastrophe scale as Fukushima at the middle, at the center of Europe. So now they are operating at a reduced capacity, making it difficult to provide enough electricity for Ukraine's households. I'm sure we all understand how slow, from a technical point of view, is the process of restoring the capacity of a nuclear power plant. And this is a serious loss to Ukraine's total generation. But also, we all should understand that this is also a huge risk of a nuclear disaster. And this risk is increasing with every day, with every missile attack. This is like relying on blind luck. Definitely not how we should treat nuclear energy. And as my colleagues has mentioned, and I do really appreciate your messages, we must not allow any regime to commit war crimes with impunity. We must not allow any regime to take nuclear plants hostage and threaten the world. And we must not allow Russia to make a success story for other terrorist regimes that attacking on energy sector can bring military advantage. We should stop Russia immediately. And for this purpose, we should ban all Russian nuclear generation. We should find proper solution how we could act more actively in this type of sanctions against Russian Rosatom, against Russian nuclear generation. Russian state company who staff helped Rosatom, who staff helped to seizure Zaporizhia NPP are the same war criminals who shell the power plants. And that all Russian own will be turned into a weapon and sooner or later used against all of you. Therefore, Russia must be demilitarized and denuclearized. And coming back to your question, this is really important to understand that Russia's invasion of Ukraine is prompting a wholesale shift of energy trade and investment flows, leaving Russia with a much weaker position in general energy market. And this is important and sanction war. There is a current worldwide trend for growth in oil and gas consumption, and we see this because of this war, because of this situation with sanctions and replacing Russian gas and coal. It is expected that we hope, and it is expected that renewable generation will rise significantly by the end of the decade. And this is clear message was delivered by the US, European Union, within COP26, that future based on the renewables. The era of natural gas demand growth is coming to an end. And we all believe today that we should strengthen our policies and be more active to end this golden age of gas because of war. But we see that a lot of LNG remains critical for providing enough gas for European consumers. We see that a lot of market changes were conducted within this threat. In our country's post-war recovery plan, we base this plan on phasing out fossil fuels and increasing the share of renewables and nuclear generation for sure. Considering the size of Ukraine's economy and its energy industry, which is really quite resilient and quite large, there is no doubt that we will be able to replace energy that used to come to Europe from Russia. Ukraine will be able to do this. And Ukraine's clean energy export will help Europe keep in line with its climate goals and help European energy system become more secure. And this is our goal. And energy transition with the participation of Ukraine is giving up traditional fossil fuels will be a pivotal moment in energy history. That is why very important to give proper message for business. That is why important to make sure that clean energy producers around the world are prepared for faster transition. This is really important message because right now we see that a lot of high voltage equipment should be replaced in Ukraine because of massive attack, because of damages. And it is really difficult to find proper proposal on the market because of the market conditions. Market high voltage equipment not ready for our orders, not ready to provide equipment in short period of time. Market really huge, but not ready for transition, for energy transition. And we see this. And important message, which has mentioned my colleague from Romania, energy investment. Energy investment, clean energy investment, including investment in energy efficiency and nuclear facilities, and affordable financing for energy transition projects are vital, especially for Ukraine.
Really appreciate the perspective here, Deputy Minister. I think it's important, you're talking about a level of ambition and the ability to move past Russian energy dependence. I want to turn to Ambassador Bartushka. I see your hand up. How is, we're watching not only ambition and desire to transform away from reliance on Russian energy, but we're seeing investment, the Repower EU legislation and what's coming out in the policy circles in terms of, hundreds of billions of dollars being invested in energy infrastructure for a sustainable future, I think is a powerful message here too. So in addition to the general thoughts you have on the Deputy Minister's perspective, I think really welcome your context around some of those maneuvers as well.
Well, thank you very much. For the question which was asked whether Europe actually will leave Russian gas and other fuels behind, it was decided already in March this year at the European Summit in Versailles that Europe will leave Russian oil, gas, coal, and nuclear fuel by 2027 in 5 years' time. That's ambitious, but we're gonna make it. I mean, there's no way back. So yes, we're going to leave Russia behind because we simply don't want to pay for their military. As simple as that. We don't want to be in any way seen as supporting a regime which clearly declared Europe its enemy. By now, both the US and Europe, the whole EU, are non-friendly, as Russians say. So I think that's a done deal. There'll be plenty of arbitration coming at Gazprom, for example, for the non-deliveries of gas to Germany, Czech Republic, France, Netherlands, and elsewhere. So that would be also interesting to see how Russians deal with that. Because if they want to keep any relationship with Europe after the war ends, and maybe one day when Putin is gone, they will have to pay, not just to Ukraine, but also to Europe, a lot of money. I'm not sure they're actually prepared for that. There's this fantasy among some Russians that, once Putin is gone, everything will come back to February 23rd. And that's simply not going to happen. Russia is an outcast and it will remain an outcast for quite some time. And as for the question about Repower EU and other investments, look, we understand this is going to be tough. It will cost billions and billions of euros. We will spend those money both on emergency measures to get through the winters, which means, for example, allowing to burn a little bit more coal for the next couple of winters, but also major investments in renewables, savings, energy efficiency, and nuclear. The member states understand they will have to spend much more on both supporting the population through those prices and supporting the industry. When Germany approved the 200 billion euro support package for the industry and population in October, 2 months ago, it was a big news in Europe. In the meantime, basically, most European governments approved similar packages, similar to the size of the population. My country did as well, France and others did. So yes, we will manage. We are a fairly rich continent. We understand the danger coming from the east, and we will do what we need to do. Thank you.
And Minister Berchal, I saw your hand on this conversation as well, and I think we definitely be expanded in the context of how nuclear energy can play a role in diversification. Would welcome your thoughts as well in terms of where in this energy transition, not just where we are in the crisis, but where do we find ourselves in Europe on energy security in a more durable long-term fashion, and what is Russia's role in that?
Well, just allow me to start with a few comments echoing what was said earlier. In the context of the Russian military operation in the Ukraine, there has been quite a lot of discussions regarding the risks military actions can have upon the nuclear power plants. And that's true, but I would like to alert that the same threat is for any energy production facilities, talking about hydro dam, coal power plant, gas grids, even renewable grids. They all pose the same risk, and we need to be alerted about that because all are critical infrastructure. That's why, in my opinion, I always treated energy not as a right, as I said, not just as a right, but as a security. Having the security aspect, critical security aspect with the critical infrastructure. One thought or two on the transition. We need to be very careful not to replace one dependency with another one. So one lesson that I would like to learn, all of us, is, as I said earlier, how are we learning from the past mistakes in order to build the present, but especially the future? And one is, use the realities on any country in terms of the energy mix, but likewise, be careful not to create one dependency with another, not to replace one dependency with another. And with regard to the security or a sustainable energy transition in the current geopolitical context, I think that on a short term, we need to concentrate on ensuring security of supply at affordable prices for this winter and beyond. Then on the medium term, I think energy transition will depend on the feasibility of the measures for the right framework for supply and the impact on final consumers. And here we need to really look at that energy mix because not all the countries have solar, for example, on the renewable or wind. So that's why we need to be realistic and wise when we are going on the energy mix at every single country. And then I think thirdly, on a long term, we need to start developing energy ecosystems encompassing multi-sources and deliverables such as electricity, biofuel, hydrogen, industrial heat, and so on and so forth. And it's my honest belief that from this perspective, and I guess my message is that there should not be no competition between technologies in reaching our energy transition objectives. It's enough room and potential for all the sources. Nuclear, renewable, gas to some extent can complement each other in order to deliver multiple benefits for final consumers at affordable prices. And I will end, please just let me share with you the lesson that we learned on the nuclear and especially on the SMR. And I will say to you that Romania and Nuclear Electrica is standing ready to share with you our experience. So don't be shy in reaching out to us. So, a few lessons learned so far from deploying the SMRs. I think the nuclear energy requires long-term strategic, planning and commitment. And financing is a key important to that. Yes, it is very expensive at the beginning, but on a medium to long-term term basis is paying off. Then you need a strong and independent regulator. That's very important in ensuring compliance with the highest safety standard and non-proliferation treaties. Safety is first. Then mutual beneficial international partners are key because nuclear program cannot be developed in silo. They require the involvement of the technology vendors, suppliers, different stakeholders. And obviously from our side, as I said, and I'm stressing, and you will be hearing me all the time, please don't get tired of me repeating, but I do honestly believe that it's a huge chance for US to really grab Central Eastern Europe market. It's for you to grab it, and we are standing ready to help you on that, achieving this goal. Then another lesson is participation of the local industry in implementing the new technology. Then the legal and the financial ecosystem needs to be conducive to facilitate investments in large-scale infrastructure projects or in new first-of-a-kind design. That's very important. That's supply chain. And obviously, you need a competent promoter. We are lucky in Romania to have Nuclear Electrica. But in short, I think it's a huge opportunity for the nuclear to play its role, as I said, not just in being a secure, reliable source of energy, but so many benefits are, additional benefits are coming from the nuclear energy, hydrogen being one of that. And again, it's a huge opportunity for our region. And I know the time is coming close to an end. I will just say, look, continue to Atlantic Council, continue to promote those topics because they are very timely and they are incredibly important. Because one thing that I learned looking over the past year on those projects in terms of the energy, don't lose sight of the fake news because we are still in a hybrid war. That's why I'm praising you, and I think the event you had, all the events you are putting together, but the one in Turkey was so important because again, it put the light on the importance of the fake news and combating the fake news, especially on the nuclear. You will be hearing all this nonsense about, how, nuclear is so and so. It's not. It's science is showing that it's one of the cleanest sources of energy. So again, thank you for organizing those, and I look very much forward to participate in the next ones.
Well, Minister Bertrand, I think you preempted me, and I really appreciate your rundown in terms of recommendations and advice and how we can move forward. Paraphrasing some of the comments here we have in the chat box and the questions and answers phase, people are interested in knowing how, what opportunities exist, not just for Central Europe, but the broader transatlantic community. I think neighbors of Central Europe, when you think about Ukraine or Turkey, about what we can do and to build resilience and continue to transition to clean energy. Deputy Minister Demchikov, I don't know if you have some closing thoughts just in context of recommendations you have for that building momentum towards a clean energy future and one that is more resilient and free of Russian influence. And Ambassador Bartushka, I'll turn to you after the Deputy Minister.
Thank you so much. Fortunately, Putin's action threatens the rest of the world, not just only Ukraine. And coming back to the topic of our discussion, I would like to say that Putin is also fighting against climate neutrality and the sustainable future as such. And the whole economy of modern Russia is driven by hydrocarbons. We should all understand that for the Kremlin, every step in the direction of climate neutrality is a nail in the coffin. That is why Russia will always oppose any shift to sustainable development, sustainable energy, and green transition. And we have a lot of examples, such actions before war and during this war. And Russia will especially try to use its leverage now in the eve of the winter season, hoping that our energy bills, higher energy bills in Europe and lower temperatures in our Ukrainian homes will shift public attitudes in Europe. And the European leaders will have to agree to Russia's energy blackmail. The situation clearly shows that a carbon-free future and sustainable energy is the only possible way forward to make sure that energy is not used as a weapon and human development does not pose a threat to the environment. And this is really very important to understand that in Ukraine, energy is without doubt another front line, and they heating our critical energy infrastructure. And this is our new reality. And this is new reality we should add and speed up phasing out of hydrocarbons. We must do this sooner than we planned, and new technologies must stay ahead of existing challenges. And this is very huge and threat for Putin, because in his energy strategy, energy security strategy, our Ukrainian synchronization with European grids, electricity synchronization with European grids, was identified as a threat for Russia's energies. And energy transition in Europe, this is also a threat.
Well, I appreciate it, Deputy Minister Dymchakov. Ambassador Bartushka, 30 seconds on your final thoughts as we close out here.
Look, we always said that what we need is that European politicians would pay a little bit more attention to energy. They certainly do since February 24 of this year. We will manage. We have everything we need. We have resources, we have money, we have bright people, we have the public which understands what needs to be done, and we will manage. So I'm fairly optimistic, and I think that a couple of years from now, we will have a talk at Atlantic Council about how swiftly actually Europe got rid of Russian energy sources. So thank you for inviting me. Thank you.
Well, we appreciate hosting you all. I thank you again to the audience joining us today. I hope this discussion helped shed some light on the importance of getting European energy policies right, the consequence if we don't. And of course, thank you to our speakers. We're honored to have each of you here to spend some time with us. In particular, Deputy Minister, we wish you the very best for our colleagues in Ukraine as you continue to fight against Russia's unjust invasion. It's now my pleasure to turn the floor over from moderating this discussion to our Senior Director of the Council's European Energy Center, Jorn Fleck, who's going to spotlight a conversation with Minister Sebastian Barduja, who is Minister of Research, Innovation, and Digitalization of Romania. Thank you again to our distinguished panelists, and over to you, Jorn.
Thank you so much, Landon, and to our panelists for this rich discussion on energy transition in Europe and in Central Europe. Delighted we could make that happen this morning. My name is Jorn Fleck. I'm the Senior Director of the Europe Center here at the Atlantic Council. And I have the pleasure of welcoming all of you again on day 3 of our Central Europe Week. our annual series exploring and celebrating the rich history and partnership between the United States and Central Europe. We're switching from energy to another area full of potential opportunities and some challenges too. And so I'm delighted to welcome to today's Spotlight conversation Romania's Minister of Research, Innovation and Digitalization, Sebastian Burduja, for a discussion on Romania's and the region's digital future. Minister Burduja, a warm welcome. Great to see you again.
Thank you for having me, and it's a wonderful pleasure, Mr. Fleck, and thank you for properly pronouncing my name. It doesn't happen that often.
I try. We're off to a good start then.
That's right.
To set the scene a little bit, and as Minister Burduja knows better than most, the digital transformation of our economies and our societies carries enormous economic, geopolitical, but also societal potential and opportunity for the Central European region, in particular, the advent of new technologies and their applications, from artificial intelligence to quantum computing to 5 and 6G technologies, have that transformative potential for the region, not just to catch up with, let's say, Western European countries, but to leapfrog and become leaders in some areas. At the same time, we've seen in the context of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, cyber attacks, the disinformation campaigns, some of the darker sides and the vulnerabilities and challenges that digital applications and technologies bring with them. And so with all of that in mind, we wanted to have a conversation with you about Romania, about Central Europe. Romania has found itself in the center of all things digital recently. You hosted the International Telecommunication Union Plenipotentiary earlier in the fall, September, October. And you will also host the 3Cs Summit next year with a digital pillar. And so it's great to see you again. Want to dive right in. Just remind everyone in the audience that you can follow along our discussion on Twitter at AC Europe with the hashtag Central Europe Week. And so I want to dive right in and maybe start with Romania, which in the European Commission's DESI index had some real bright spots and some areas for improvement. Especially in the area of ICT graduates, female ICT specialists, connectivity. There were some real, even top 5 positions for Romania. And at the same time, you also face some challenges that we can dive into a little bit more. Wanted to start us off with your priorities and how you're thinking of leveraging some of those assets and strengths while also addressing some real challenges.
Well, thank you for this opportunity again. It's a great pleasure and honor. I love the Atlantic Council. I'm a Millennium Fellow. I love my experience in it, and we're a family essentially with all my fellows. So it's wonderful to be here, and thank you for this setting. Basically, people ask me, what are you doing at the Ministry of Research, Innovation and Digitalization? I'm an economist by training. But I think you put it, you put it exactly right in the beginning. This mandate is about the future, and it's about 2 things: resilience and prosperity, or economic development. If you look at, resilience is hard. It's easy to defend. You see it in this day and age in our region, how important it is to have proper systems, to have cyber defense, cyber security. And we face daily threats. I won't call them daily attacks, but we face daily threats that are of moderate complexity, and our systems have held up very well. On the prosperity side, if you look at, as an economist, I guess, looking at centuries of economic thought, or at least since Bob Solow and Paul Romer, really the key insight is you have to invest in your innovation system, in your endogenous innovation capacity, if you want to achieve long-term growth. And exactly as you said, if you want to leapfrog, then you need to adopt those latest technologies. And that allows for an accelerated pace of catching up, which Romania has done. And in the context of the ITU, I've had probably 40 bilateral meetings with ministers from around the world. Some of them had been here years before, and they, without exception, they told us, look, you guys are doing a great job. It's a miraculous change from a communist regime that was the toughest in the region, possibly the toughest in the world. You remember, it was the only change of regime that resulted in bloodshed in 1989, over 1,000 dead, including the dictator and his wife, which were executed, to a democracy that is stable, that is very much Atlanticist, very much fond of the partnership with the United States, and very much, I think, a pillar of stability here in a very complicated region where we see quite often countries that are technically a part of NATO and the EU, but they go astray. And I think Romania has the merit of staying the course in recent years. So back to your question, I took over this mandate 7 months ago, and indeed the challenges that, at least on the DESI index, the Digital Economy and Society Index, Romania is overall last. And we have special challenges in digital public services and digital competencies, basic skills at the level of the population, as well as digital SMEs, or the digitalization of the private sector. So it's not something you can address through a single reform or a single policy or a single investment. And so we've crafted a program that I think is very ambitious. It essentially started with legislation, and we've passed over the past few months, I dare to say, the most ambitious policy changes in the past decades, really. Let me explain. We now have legislation on cloud services in Romania, including cloud-first policies, including data taxonomy, the classification of data based on where it belongs, the private government cloud versus public commercial clouds provided by, commercial entities. We now have an interoperability law that fundamentally changed the paradigm and essentially told state institutions, look, you don't own people's data. The people own their data. And by the way, what you need to do is make that data available whenever another public institution asks for it. And if you don't, you're going to get fined. And the fines are not lightweight. They're quite significant, at least for the Romanian context. So now we have finally a framework in which we can operate. We're also in the process of passing a very important law, which we need to do by the end of this month, which is the law on cybersecurity and cyber defense. And I can go into further detail on that, but just to lay out a few pieces that were very hard to push through. And frankly, we've looked at the models of other countries. We've also done something that few countries in Europe have done, and that's of recent nature. We've essentially banned all Russian software from public institutions. We followed the US's lead. I think the US did this back in 2017, 2018. It banned at least Kaspersky as an antivirus solution. And I think a few other countries, Germany and Italy, maybe the Netherlands, have done it sooner or earlier this year. And, after the conflict had started, we still had local authorities that were purchasing these Russian solutions because they were very cheap. And on tender regulations in Romania, if you come in at a very low price, you almost can't say no. So you kind of have to go with that. So we decided to just ban them by law, and that's been a very good decision. We also did something quite drastic last year, which was our law on 5G security. Now, every provider, not just the 5G components, but of all IT components, is going through a vetting process through the National Security Council. And we've managed to ensure a safe and proper process for vetting those providers. And we've also managed to impose on telecom operators to replace all components coming from a certain provider within the next 5 years, 5 to 7 years, not just in the core network, but throughout our networks. I think it's one of the most ambitious pieces of legislation that's out there that is essentially protecting our systems and ensuring resilience. We have an ambitious agenda on artificial intelligence and a range of other topics, but I guess, and I'm sorry for the long answer, but it's not an easy answer, because to digitally transform a country, we've looked at other examples, and it takes 5 to 10 years, usually closer to 10. Even Estonians or Moldovans or other countries in our region that have become examples of how to digitally transform their nation, it took them a long time, and it's not easy.
Yeah, and thank you for outlining that broad agenda. You touched on so many points that I want to come back to. One quick question, maybe to taking a regional approach and zooming out a little bit. You already spoke about some of the forward-leaning policies you put in place. You also touched on some of the strong fundamentals that are both unique to Romania: strong STEM education, large ICT graduates, a lack of legacy technologies in some respects, but also on some of the challenges, general digital skills, which you said are part of your relatively low score on DESI. How are you thinking about this in terms of, you already mentioned looking at other countries? Are there specific examples that you're looking at? Are there regional initiatives and potential for regional cooperation that can advance Romania and the region at the same time?
So we have a special relationship with the Republic of Moldova for many reasons. Historical, we speak the same language. Culturally, we're very similar. And what they've managed to do in an extremely complicated spot in which they continue to be, or it's even more complicated by the day there, they've managed to take their government online. They have over 200 public services online. You can pretty much do anything you need in relationship to the state at the click of a button. And they've done it over 10 years with the help of the World Bank. And their big merit is that they have had that horizon and that patience and that continuity. And regardless of the political coalitions, they all said, we have to go digital, and they did it. So now we have a very close working relationship with their deputy prime minister, who handles digitalization. And essentially, they're transferring their solutions over to our side. And they're doing it for free. We're helping them on cybersecurity, especially in the current context. And we're helping them in many, many different ways that I won't go into. But we're trying to find a shortcut, and so that it doesn't take 10 years from now on, but closer to 3 or 5, by adopting some of the solutions, literally taking them and adapting them to a bigger market. Romania's 10 times bigger almost, but it's still a great starting point. And it also helps them speed up their own accession into the EU process, which they're already embarking on, and we're very excited about that. So it's kind of a cool thing. I don't know if there's precedent to it, but we're excited to be working with them. And again, to us, it's a privilege to learn from our neighbor, and it's a smaller country, but it's unbelievable what they have done.
Piggybacking on that, when you were here in November and we had a chance to speak with an Atlantic Council group, you also spoke about the challenge of the brain drain in a very interesting way, where you have obviously that strong fundamental of a strong STEM education and a large ICT specialist community, but some of that community is abroad, is in the United States or elsewhere in Europe. Can you speak about how you leverage that community and address brain drain as a challenge that is afflicting not just Romania, but a number of these countries in Central Europe?
Yeah, we're trying to turn that into an asset to say, every year there's close to 200,000 Romanians that leave. About 100,000 of them come back every year. And so in net terms, we lose 100,000 people, and they tend to be from some of the best and brightest and hardest working. And we've asked ourselves this question, is how do we connect them back? And so in my recent visit to the US, I laid out the foundation for establishing a Romanian Office of Science and Technology in Silicon Valley. We've identified Silicon Valley as the center of global innovation, really, through universities and the private sector and what public institutions are doing there. And we've also mapped out our scientific diaspora, as well as Romanians in large tech companies, and we met with some of them, as well as in startups. And some of them have already established startups that are unicorns now. And guess what? Many of them want to give back. So at least in my mind, it was a change from complaining about the brain drain to embracing this idea of brain circulation, where we take these brilliant Romanians that frankly are where they should be. It's hard to take somebody like Sergiu Pașca, a guy who has his own lab at Stanford University with 30, 40 of the brightest people in the world working with him under his coordination, a guy who's just put in brain cells into mice and made it in the front page of the New York Times and Nature, and he could not do that in Romania. Let's be honest. He does it because he's in Silicon Valley, because he's at Stanford, because he's surrounded by all these brilliant people. But guess what? He wants to contribute. He wants to help. He wants to mentor young Romanian scientists. Or take Raluca Popa. She's one of the most accomplished women really in the world in the IT&C space, and possibly the greatest expert in cryptography. She also wants to mentor Romanian startups and connect them to capital in Silicon Valley, to angel investors, to venture capitalists. We have this amazing asset, which is our people. And so, beyond the tradition in STEM, we also have a very vibrant startup community. But if you don't connect that to capital, then a lot of great ideas, great projects, great companies, great people end up, going to waste essentially. So we're trying to build that bridge with our diaspora, access capital, access ideas, access connections, networks that otherwise we could not access.
Minister, I wanted to, I know we're slowly running out of time, but I wanted to come back to your opening of these various policies on data, cyber, cell infrastructure that you put in place. Romania is obviously also an EU member state, deeply integrated into the European economy. And we've heard a lot about Central and Eastern European leadership in the context of Russia's war against Ukraine, support for Ukraine on the humanitarian, economic, military front. Can we expect that sort of leadership to spill over into other areas like tech, digital policy, where there are other tendencies at an EU level that Central European countries might look at differently? Can we expect that leadership that we've seen on other fronts maybe spill over a little bit?
I think so, most definitely. I think that Romania's a place the world needs to look at based on the quality of its talent, based on the commitment of its government, based on the fact that we have a prime minister who's a retired 4-star army general. That's not very common, but he's extremely operational, and the country has accomplished over the past year a tremendous amount in terms of the reforms that have been passed, the investments that are coming in. It's really a very happening place. And, in the context of this horribly tragic conflict in Ukraine, where Russia just completely smashed all rules of democratic principles and sovereignty, I think that Romania has to be a pillar in the region. It can help rebuild Ukraine. That we will come to that point. We're already preparing for it. And I think that leadership role should be recognized. It gives me great pain to note that we're trying to get into the Schengen area, and tomorrow is the critical day, essentially, when it will come to a vote. There's a single country in the Schengen area opposing it now, and for no reason. Technically, we fit all the criteria, not to mention that, again, compared to other countries in the Schengen area, we've been a lot more closely aligned to the values of human rights, the rule of law, democratic principles, multi-party democracy, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that we do need to make our voice heard. I think that there should be no competition between the EU and the US. I think that our interests are very closely aligned. I don't think we can compete with other powers like Russia and especially China unless we stick together. I do perceive certain voices in European society that complain about big American companies that steal the thunder away from Europe. I think that together we're a lot better off, and that investments by these big companies, I've seen them in Romania, and they've grown our country tremendously. And there's innovation happening in Romania because of these strategic investments by large American companies, not in spite of them. And so I personally am of the opinion that we need to work together. And truly, the enemies are beyond this relationship, and they're many. So I very much hope and believe in this unity and the transatlantic partnership, and I will personally push for that whenever I have the chance.
Thank you, Minister Borduja. We're out of time, but you ended on a great point that's really at the heart of the Atlantic Council, the Europe Center, and our Central Europe. We're better off. I think it's a good note to end on. Thank you for sparing the time today. As you said, you're part of the Atlantic Council family as a former millennial fellow, and we are looking forward to continuing this conversation on digital and much more. To our viewers, thank you for joining us. Keep following us at AC Europe with the hashtag Central Europe Week for more programming Thursday and Friday of this week. And thank you again, Minister Borduja.
Thank you so much. This was a great pleasure, great honor.
Thank you.